Good evening, everyone. Today's webinar topic is latest development in research, analyst, regulation for informed investing. So, for this, we have with us Mr. Biharilal Devra, sir, Director at Abacus Asset Management LLP, an Indian focused asset management firm. With over 2 decades of experience across asset classes, Sir has managed portfolios for corporate, family offices, and university endorsement. A chartered accountant, CFA charter holder, and holder of multiple global finance certificates. He leads the AIF, PNS, and RIA verticals at Abacus, overseeing portfolios, analytics, risk frameworks, and strategic investment planning. Biharilal sir also plays a vital role in shaping India's investment ecosystem as chairman of the Associate of Portfolio Managers in India (APMI) and a member at ARIA, a passionate advocate of ethical investing and financial education. Sir regularly contributes to industry development through teaching, curriculum design, and regulatory advice. Now, short glimpse about NISM. NISM is a public trust established in 2006 by SEBI, the regulator of the securities markets in India. The institute carries out a wide range of capacity building activities at various levels aimed at enhancing the quality standards in securities markets. Now, before beginning the session, I would like to request all the participants to note some important points. First, the question will be taken at the end during the Q&A segment. Second, all participants will receive a participation certificate within 3 to 4 working days. Third, the recording of this session will be available on NISM YouTube channel. Now I request Biharilal sir to begin with the session.
Thank you, Sahil. I hope all of you can hear me. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our participants from across the world. Today's session is specifically designed for going through the latest clarification which SEBI has issued through FAQs on July 23rd, 2025. We thought we'll take this opportunity to go through the RA regulation, discuss few pointers which SEBI has clarified, and maybe take up some questions towards the end. So the way we have designed the session is we have first 45 minutes on the session itself. If we sort of complete early, then probably we'll take up questions. Otherwise, please type in your questions on the Q&A box or chat box, and we'll try to answer them during the session or after the session. To begin with, as you all know, SEBI research analysts are regulated under SEBI Research Analyst Regulation 2014, popularly known as RA regulation, which came in effect from December 1, 2014. The RA regulation specify conditions for registration, certifications, limitations on trading, compensations, disclosures, code of conduct, record maintenance, and inspection. So these FAQs have to be read in reference to the RA regulation of 2014 and not standalone basis for all interpretations and otherwise to that extent. Moving on, what SEBI has clarified, and again, this is part of the FAQ. As part of the FAQ, that individuals employed as research analysts by a research entity do not need to obtain a separate registration certificate from SEBI. So if you are a independent, if you are a corporate research entity who has already taken a research analyst, and if you are an employee of that particular entity, you need not register with SEBI separately for a license for issuing research reports under that particular entity. Secondly, the individuals employed as research analysts by research entity are required to comply with the qualification and certification requirements. So if you recall, under research analyst regulation, there are certain requirements for qualification for research analyst, and there is a specific certification requirement for completing NISM exam 15. It's NISM series 15 exam, which is meant for all research analysts which are required to do for issuing research reports to public at large. That examination will still be required. The research entity which employs individuals as research analyst is obviously required to obtain research certificate, registration certificate under RA regulation. Interestingly, a sole proprietor can also make an application to get registered as an independent research analyst. And he obviously have to fulfill the conditions and other eligibility criteria for individual under RA regulation. If you are a partnership firm, the partners needs to comply with the qualification. If you are a corporate, then you can have a separate identifiable division, or the directors or the person in charge of the department fulfill these requirements. SEBI has also clarified that proxy advisors, people who advise on resolutions, especially for during the voting season, they are also required to obtain registration under research analyst regulation. From a definition perspective, SEBI has reiterated that research analyst means a person who, for consideration, is engaged in the business of providing research services and includes a part-time research analyst. Uh, Friends, you will recall part-time research analyst is a concept which SEBI has introduced recently in the regulation, and the criteria are defined under the whole regulation which came in earlier this year, and that opens up doors for people who want to continue or pursue or test the waters to become the research analyst. Another common question which keeps on coming through market participants is that which personnel are required to take research analyst examination, especially from a compliance standpoint. SEBI has clarified that the personnel who are engaged in clerical activities, marketing activities, back office assistant, support services in relation to the publication or distribution of the research report, they are not covered as research analyst under the definition of research analyst, which means they are not required to comply with the examination requirement or qualification requirement under this particular act. More specifically, any person who will not be considered as person associated with research services if these personnel, while performing these activities, do not have client contact. So that is very sacrosanct. If you do not have client contact, then obviously you are not covered under person associated with research analyst. And these activities have no connection with the research services provided as an RA in terms of inputs or otherwise. As long as you are part of, let's say you are a designer or you are a publisher, you are kind of helping create marketing activities, or you are helping kind of publish it online, you are not covered as part of the definition of research analyst. From a research report perspective, SEBI has also clarified that research report would mean any written or electronic communication that includes research analysis or research recommendation or an opinion concerning securities or public offer providing the basis for investment decision and does not include the following communication. So there is a list of communication which is not included in research, and SEBI has given a list of those. And that list includes essentially, things like general market comments, things like economic and political commentary, things like internal communication which are not given to clients. Those are not part of research analyst report. Research report will also not include statistical summary of financial data. So, for example, if you summarize the GDP data out there, technical analysis of a particular sector. So, for example, you have analyzed solar sector and you are talking about whether the capacity has gone up or down, or index demand and supply, which is essentially what is the demand and supply for index based on the data which is available. For example, the buy calls or sell calls or some of those, or any other communication specified by SEBI. The thing which one needs to note is that if you are, as a general principle, if you are giving any recommendation, or if you are talking about a security, then most likely it will be part of research report. If you're not talking about a particular security on which an investor or a reader of the report can take access, take a decision on, as long as you're talking about general index summary or technical summary or any other data, it is not part of research report. So tomorrow morning, if TV channel invites you and asks you about your view on RBI policy, yes, you are not covered under a research analyst regulation. But if they ask you about your view on a particular company, whether to buy, sell, or otherwise, then you are covered under sort of research analyst to that extent. One important aspect which SEBI has clarified this time is very clearly in terms of what is technical analysis and whether these technical analysis are part of research analyst regulation. So if you recall, technical analysis is people who do trend analysis based on certain statistical methodologies or softwares, and they identified whether the stock is going to go up or down or any other sort of directions from that perspective. SEBI has very clearly clarified that research services provided under RA regulations are specific to the securities under purview of SEBI and are agnostic to the methodology provided or used to provide such research services. So whether you use fundamental analysis to give a security recommendation, whether you use technical analysis to give a security recommendation, whether you use a quantitative model to give recommendation, if you are giving recommendations for securities, you will be covered under research analyst regulation, no matter how you define it from that perspective. So it is very clear that if you call yourself, as technical analyst and giving security specific recommendation, then you are covered. What are securities? Securities are, what are defined under Securities Contract Act, of SEBI, and that primarily includes all mutual funds, AIFs, or any other security which is out traded over there. Uh, Another aspect which SEBI came up a couple of months ago was the formation of this body called Research Analyst Administration and Supervisory Body. Uh, as of now, the way process stands, if you want to apply for a research analyst regulation, you cannot apply to SEBI directly. You have to apply to the RAASB in this case. In India, the current license for research analyst administration and supervisory body has been granted to BSE, which is Bombay Stock Exchange. You have to go to their website, apply to them as part of registration application. They will fill in your application data, etc., to SEBI at SEBI portal. And once the application is approved, you are required to pay the fees for SEBI as well as for BSE, which is the RAASB from that perspective. The fees for SEBI at least was very rationalized, if you recall. The application fees for individual partnership firms and proxy advisors was roughly 2,000 rupees initially. For the application, registration was about 3,000. Renewal was about 1,000 for every 5 years. For body corporates, the fees were, as mentioned on the slides. The fees for Bombay Stock Exchange for acting as RAASB would be different, and that will be governed by their own laws, and that is available on their website. From a SEBI's perspective, what they have given is, their fees to that extent. The other thing which I think SEBI had done recently was, instead of a net worth requirement, they had put in the deposit requirement. Now the deposit has to be maintained with RAASB, which is the BSE in this case, and this was defined based on the number of clients specified by SEBI. So up to 150 clients, the deposit was required to be 1 lakh rupees. And as you go along, the maximum deposit you are required to put in was rupees 10 lakh. This is, a big relief versus, the erstwhile case, where for each, application for a corporate as well as individual, you're required to have a net worth criteria. So please remember, there is no net worth criteria in research analyst regulations now. It is more of a deposit. And this deposit can be given as a fixed deposit under a specified bank as per the guideline of RASB, or as per the liquid fund lien, which is available under BSE to that extent from there. From a compliance perspective, one thing which I think SEBI has come out this time in the FAQ, that the person associated with research services, they were required to obtain the NISM 15 exam, and of 1 year period from the date of this circular. So the date of this circular is July 23 to 2025. A 1 year period, which is July 23, 2026, has been granted to them for completing their certification. Please note this, 1 year is for person associated with research services and not for the principal officer, of the firm, which is required to have the certification at all points in time. And the second aspect is that from a non-individual research analyst or research entity perspective, they must appoint a compliance officer, to monitor compliances with SEBI regulations to that extent. SEBI has also clarified that the research analyst covers not just equity and equity-related security, but they cover all securities which are defined under Section 2H of Securities Contract Act Regulation 1956 to that extent. Trading restrictions. Are there any trading restrictions on research analysts after they have put up report, or if they have sort of, published any research report? SEBI has reiterated that as per the trading restriction imposed under Regulation 16 of RA Research Analyst Regulations 2014, independent research analyst, part-time research analyst, individuals employed as research analysts or their associates are restricted from trading in securities which they have recommended within 30 days before and 5 days after the publication of the research report on a subject company. So for example, if you have published the research report on 31st of August, then from 1st to 30th August, that is 30 days before the publication of report, and until 5th or 6th September, which is 5 days after the publication of reports, you are not allowed to trade in that particular security. Now, SEBI obviously hasn't talked about buy or sell, but it means that you cannot do either way a transaction. The idea here is to kind of avoid any conflicts of interest and avoid any contra trades or front running from that perspective. Research analysts are also restricted from trading in securities contrary to their recommendation. So they don't want you to kind of give a buy recommendation and you end up selling. Similarly, research analysts and their associates shall not purchase or receive securities of the issuer before the issuer's initial public offering. So if you are going through an IPO and that IPO you are covering the security, they want to make sure that you don't have any conflict of interest by receiving those companies shares in advance, and that can kind of that is refrained. You are required to refrain from those kind of restriction. Please note that the prohibition of insider trading regulations, which are covered under PIT regulations of SEBI, those are applicable to all intermediaries. Those restrictions will be applicable to you over and above the restrictions under a specific act. So the 30-day and 5-day period is applicable to you under research analyst regulation. The PIT act would be applicable to you over and above that, and whatever restrictions are there would be required to understand to that extent. From a disclosure perspective, so what SEBI has defined is that if you go on a public media and talk about a particular security, there are certain requirements from a disclosure standpoint. They have defined that public media would mean any media source available to general public and include a radio, television, internet, web, or print media, which means social media is also part of public media to that extent. There are certain disclosures which are required. So one is this is applicable to directors and its employees of the research entity, or the research analyst. They are required to, disclose their registration status, details of their financial interest in their subject company during public appearance. So, for example, if you are talking about a company X and then you have 1% or 2% shareholding in that company, you're required to disclose that particular shareholding or any other financial interest you might have in that particular company. If you recall, under section 21(2) of research analyst regulation, whenever a person, including a director or employee of an investment advisor or credit rating agency or asset management company, or fund manager makes a public appearance or make a recommendation or offers an opinion concerning securities or public offers through public media, all the provisions of Regulation 16 on limitations of trading, which is the 30-day and 5-day, and Regulation 17 on limitations on compensation apply mutatis mutandis to them, and he is required to disclose his name, registration status, details of financial services of the subject company at the time of making such recommendations or offering such opinion in personal capacity, responding to queries from audiences or journalists in personal capacity, communicating the research report or substance of the research report through the public media. So 2, 3 things they have clarified. One is if you are making a recommendations or offering an opinion on a particular security, even if it is in a public personal capacity, you're required to disclose and apply those requirements. Second, even if you are responding to a query to a journalist or a public who have asked you this question about your a particular company opinion, you are required to disclose and follow these things. And second, even if you're talking about communicating the substance of the research report without sort of talking about the research reports itself, then also the requirements would be applicable to you to that extent. Uh, from a client retention and record perspective, a research analyst must maintain record of client interaction, including call recordings, emails for both fee-paying as well as non-fee-paying clients. Non-fee-paying clients are also considered as clients for the purpose of reporting and deposit requirement. So that has to be taken care of, saying that while calculating the number of clients for calculating the maximum deposit you are required to put in, non-fee-pay client will also be considered to that extent. SEBI registered stockbrokers, merchant bankers, and other intermediaries who are covered under the definition are obviously covered under the definition of research entity if they want to kind of pursue separately. Investment advisor, credit rating agencies, asset management companies, fund managers of PMS, AIF, mutual fund are exempt from research analyst regulation, but they must comply with certain regulation if they issue research reports in public. And lastly, proxy advisors, obviously, as we discussed earlier, are required to kind of register from a SEBI perspective. One more question which often comes up is whether journalists or people who come on media who are on the payroll of the media organizations like televisions or newspapers or otherwise, are they required to register on with SEBI as research analyst? The answer which SEBI has given is no. The journalists who are on the payroll of media agencies such as newspapers or televisions are not required to register, with SEBI. However, if they are making a recommendations or offer an opinion concerning securities or public offers through public media, such recommendation should be based on an existing research analyst, which they have to mention, and the trading restrictions would also apply to them, right? So that part SEBI has clarified. Certain exemptions have been granted or have been clarified, that exemptions on client level segregation of research and distribution services are allowed for entities providing services to institutional client only if the standard waiver is signed. Institutional clients slash QIB or sophisticated investors who have the skills, knowledge, and means to protect their investors. Additional clarification has been given that MITC needs to be informed with them, but they may not sign, MITC. MITC is most important terms and conditions. From a compliance officer perspective, a non-individual research analyst or research entity is required to have a compliance officer or an independent professional who is a member of ICI, ICSI, ICMI, or a member of any other professional body as may be specified. Earlier, if you recall, the research entity had to appoint a compliance officer from inside only, which means an existing employee. However, now a flexibility has been granted in the law, and it is again clarified here that the independent professional who is a member of CA Institute, CS Institute, or CMA Institute can also be appointed as a compliance officer to that extent. And obviously, his role will be to monitor all the compliances with respect to the Act. An existing compliance of an intermediary, if an intermediary has more than one businesses, then an existing officer, compliance officer can also be appointed, for the purpose of research analyst regulation. Uh, Another thing which has been clarified is that intermediaries such as brokers and merchant bankers often provide research services as value-added services to client. And even if no separate fees is charged specifically for research, the overall brokerage and merchant banking charges are considered to include the cost of research. Therefore, such entities are required, to register under research analyst, because what they have provided in research is to be treated as for consideration. If you recall the definition of research analyst, the requirement was that if you are giving a research for consideration, and that part is taken care over here. And that is why you will see most of the brokers and merchant bankers who are providing research services would be registered as research analyst under SEBI regulation from that angle. In terms of conflicts of interest, the RA, which is the research analyst and research entity, cannot provide research services for securities or products in case it also provides distribution services for such securities products. So it has been clarified that you have to keep the distribution and the research separate. You cannot, on one hand, claim that you are providing independent research on a product like a mutual fund or a AIF or something else, and at the same time be the distributor of that particular product, right? So an RA cannot provide research on product, services, securities. It also distributes. Distribution must be done through separate unit or entity on arm's length basis. And there is an exemption on compliance with respect to client level segregation if research is only given to entities exclusively to institutional clients, and if the client has signed a standard waiver. That is the sort of requirement from that perspective. But there is a clear requirement for segregation of distribution and research activities to that extent. MITC requirements, so most important terms and conditions, those are required to be sort of given to all the clients before sort of, onboarding them. And they are intended to sort of, for investors who are lacking resources to make informed decision. And that's why they are sort of being informed about most important terms. The consent on MITC is not mandatory for institutional investors slash QIB, as they are more sophisticated and capable of protecting their interest. However, research analysts slash research entity must disclose MITC to all of their clients, including the clients which are institutional or otherwise. But a consent requirement for those is not given. It is also clarified that all research analysts and research entity must follow KYC procedures for clients who pay fees directly for the research services. Record maintenance requirements have been clarified. that record maintenance are required as part of the standard record keeping procedures, irrespective of whether the client is paying or non-paying. Call recording is not required if interaction is via email or other digital channels, and document interaction to address, obviously client grievances has to be maintained. Some other clarifications which are given in terms of NISM certification for sales staff, support staff, customer support staff, and other client facing staff not involved in research. There the clarification has been given that as per the explanation of section 2NE, all client and public facing staff such as analyst, sales staff, service relationship manager, client relationship manager, by whatever name called, shall be deemed to be the person associated with advice, but shall not include persons who discharge clerical or administrative function. So if a person is called, you know, client relationship manager or service relationship manager or analyst or sales staff, uh, if he is a public facing person, then ideally you would be required to consider them as person associated with investment advice, and accordingly they have to comply with the examination and certification requirement. However, if the person is purely involved in clerical or administrative function, then such person are not considered as person associated with investment advice, and they might not be required to complete the requirement. Few other clarifications which are given on this thing. So, for example, they have clarified that for technical recommendation, whether a mere technical chart with the timestamp shall suffice as a research rationale. So, as you recall, for all research which you are doing, a research rationale has to be provided or has to be maintained to remain objective. The SEBI has clarified that research analysts or research analysts are required to maintain the rationale for arriving at research recommendation. Now, that would include adequate documentary basis supported by research for preparing research report, and shall ensure the recommendations are corroborated by relevant data and analysis forming the basis of such research surveys. So even if you are doing technical analysis and have a chart, you are still required to document it appropriately, talk about your strategy, talk about how this thing has, you have formed a particular analogy and thesis before recommending a particular, security to your clients to that extent. So that part has been sort of aptly clarified. It may be noted that these FAQs are meant to clarify the common questions which are being asked by intermediaries the time again. These are not meant to change the law or supersede the law. If there is a particular provision which is already given in research analyst regulation, the same will obviously be the primary source for all practical purpose with respect to reference. However, what SEBI has done is that they have clarified certain things which they think are automatically required to that extent. There are a few questions on the chat box. If the moderator permits, we can take some of those questions. Again, those questions I will try to answer to the best of my knowledge based on my understanding, but I would request you to refer to the actual regulation and your compliance consultant for the answers before relying on some of those. There is a question with respect to, can individual RA be compliance officer its own business? My understanding, again, my limited understanding is that the compliance officer is a requirement which is only required for non-individual clients. For an individual client, the research analyst or the principal officer itself is a compliance officer, and no separate officer is required. There is additional question with respect to KYC requirement. With respect to KYC requirement, the standard requirements are outlined in SEBI Intermediary Act of 2008, along with PMLA regulation. As part of the KYC requirement, obviously the requirement of proof of identity, proof of address, and a PAN card is required. There are certain documents which are available through centralized mechanisms like KRA. One needs to kind of register with any one of the KRAs and download these documents on the KRA. Apart from KRA, under PMLA, there is a separate requirement to have CKYC a login, and one needs to kind of download that in order to comply with the PMLA requirement. So from a SEBI's perspective, KYC requirements can be completed by putting in through KRA, but additionally PMLA might request you to kind of do the CKYC as well. There is a question on MITC. Now, most important terms and condition, my understanding is are specific to a particular client for a specific contract. And once the contract of the client is over, even if he is renewing or even if he's resubscribing, the moment he signs your terms and conditions again, the same moment I think the MITC would be required from those particular sort of clients. There is a question on there is on the cap of PMS or PAS service per family for charging fees. I'm not sure if I've understood the question right. If there is a question on fees type, yes, there are some fees limits and fees types which are prescribed under RA regulation, which one needs to comply with and follow that. There's a question on MFD, whether MFD can MFD become RIA and RA, which is the research analyst. As per the clarification given by SEBI, from an individual perspective, it looks unlikely that you can become both. But if you are a non-individual, then basis the segregation check, it is possible to kind of have both client segregation separately for individuals as well as from sorry, it is possible to have a research analyst services apart from a distribution services if a non-individual case is there. Question is regarding liveliness check of as part of KYC. There are certain requirements by SEBI under the circular dated April 2020, which was later on modified to include master circular for KYC. That circular has specific requirement with respect to onboarding of the client through digital channels. And digital channels has certain requirements with respect to geotagging or liveliness or otherwise. Uh, I would request you to refer to the circular. I am not fully well versed with the specific requirements for KYC for research analysts, but I think the master circular will prevail with respect to the KYC norms which SEBI has prescribed. There is a question with respect to circular on use of mutual funds. So my understanding is SEBI has in principle already agreed with respect to liquid mutual fund, at least for research in research registered investment advisor, and the process is yet to kind of come in very soon. The process will be available both for RIAs and RAs. As we understand the process, the deadline for doing this is sometime this quarter end, and before that the process should be out. But as of now, you can still go ahead and complete the requirements of deposit by doing a fixed deposit as prescribed by the research advisory and administrative and supervisory sort of body. There's a question on MITC and e-signing. Again, I'll give you my understanding. You can take your own calls with respect to how you want to consider it. My understanding is that under IT Act, signatures which are done through DSC or Aadhaar are considered valid for the purpose of a contract. And the same would be sort of preferable for most cases where you are entering into something. I would leave it up on individual compliance officers to decide what kind of OTP they want to use and how they want to make sure that the client himself has signed and nobody else has signed, the contract or the terms and conditions themselves to that extent. There's a question on mechanisms which SEBI has introduced to verify the authenticity on social media. So as you recall, SEBI has been actively working with Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, Google, and other specified digital platforms where they have developed a capability to kind of differentiate between registered as well as unregistered advisor. If you recall, earlier this month, Meta had issued a notice saying that if you want to kind of promote your products or these things on Meta, you better sort of be regulated, and they are asking for your registration numbers and otherwise. I believe most of the specified digital platforms have started cleaning up their databases and their public forums for unauthorized advice or people who are not registered. It will be pertinent to know that there is an advertisement code which is applicable already to research analysts and RIAs, and one is required to take approval for any advertisement which or any content which they use as advertisement to solicit clients, publicly. And as long as I think you follow that, there should not be any issue to that extent, there. There are questions on AI generated stance. I think at this point in time, SEBI has issued a separate consultation paper on responsible use of AI. I don't think the regulator has taken a particular stand at this point in time. Right now, obviously, you are required to disclose it to clients if you are using AI. And once the consultation paper is out, I understand there will be some requirements for regulated entities for responsible use of AI to that extent. From an eligibility of RA perspective, I understand that the eligibility is based on graduation criteria. This, specific requirements are included in Section 7A, 7 of Research Analyst Regulation, and they are very clear in terms of whether the, graduation is possible with respect to accountancy, law, business management, finance, or otherwise. So I would request you to refer to the Regulation 7, which talks about qualification criteria for research analysts to that to that extent over there. There's a question on in a corporate entity, can an employee who hold both the research analyst and the NISM compliance or perform both roles simultaneously? Uh, so I don't know if I have understood the question appropriately, but currently research. There are two separate people which are required, one which is a principal officer and one which is a compliance officer. I don't think the intention is to have one person doing all. At least from a regulatory spirit perspective, I think in an individual license, it is being allowed. But in a corporate license, they would expect to have a maker checker or a different person doing compliance officer function. Having said that, my understanding is once you apply for a registration, you would get to understand, what the requirements are with respect to separate people. NISM is also hosting a separate webinar, as I understand, for asking or clarifying some of these questions on how to register for a research analyst. And you should follow the NISM page for, tracking the same webinar out there. From a digital and finfluencer perspective, like I said, they are already looking at, finfluencer guidelines. SEBI had already issued guidelines with respect to advertisement code. They have also issued guidelines with respect to who is required to register. And they've also very specifically told who is not required to register. So as long as you are following the guideline, which either require you to register or not required to register, I think you should be okay to that extent from there. There are some specific questions about cases with respect to duration of agreement. I would suggest that look, if these are subscription, it's better to have long term agreements so that it's easier for people to look at some of the terms and conditions which we are talking about. Again, a lot of these questions, which are kind of more specific to the operational aspects of RAs, are not part of the FAQs which are covered by SEBI. There is a master circular which is expected. Master circular is being issued for majority of the regulations, including mutual funds, PMS, AIF, RIA, RA. The master circular would have all the circulars of SEBI which are issued so far consolidated, and one should look at the master circular for finding answers to some of these questions. Uh, from a NISM exam perspective, like I said, the NISM research analyst exam is known as Series 15. The exam is available on all NISM centers along with other centers approved by NISM. One can create a profile on NISM website on the portal. Once the profile is approved, the exam slots can be booked. Even before the exams, you can go to NISM website and download the research analyst workbook, which is available for free in PDF format. And once you have taken an examination slot, which happens almost on a daily basis across India, you can appear for the said exam, and once cleared, you will get your certificate, and post which you will be eligible to apply for the license with SEBI. I think this completes majority of the questions. Sahil, if there are any other questions, let us know. We can try and answer those questions. So there are some questions on the Q&A box, which are similar. So we have answered some of those. Let me go through them and see if we can answer some of those. Uh, one question is on if you are not publicly giving any research recommendations or otherwise, are you still required to register? Well, if you are doing in-house research and if only for internal usage and not disseminating in public, you are not required to register for research analyst. The moment you start sort of disseminating it to public or doing it for consideration, you would be required to kind of, register for this thing. Um, from a broker and merchant banking perspective, even if they don't charge fees, they are still required to register because it is assumed that the fees they are charging as part of merchant banking or as part of broking is includes the research analyst fees to that extent, and that kind of requires them. And this is specifically answered in FAQ that the brokers are required sort of to register as a research analyst. Uh, The requirements of part-time RA is specified in the regulation in terms of who can apply and who can become. I would request you to kind of look at the regulations and that has detailed criteria with respect to what is required. The compliances and other things would remain the same. The only difference is the type of license which you are getting, and part-time RA is only available to individuals, so it is not available to sort of corporate as well. Can RA be an IA as well? Yes, an RA and IA can be together if they are corporate entity and non-individual as you call it, and subject to the segregation and the rules. Yes, you can have same multiple licenses in the same entity to that extent. If you are working as a distributor under non-individual form, yes, subject to the segregation rules, you can become a research analyst. NISM validity is for 3 years, RA renewal is for 5 years. I don't know if the certification validity and RA renewal validity can be matched. As of now, you would be required to complete the CPE for your certification. So after your 3-year validity for NISM certification gets completed, you have options either to appear for an online CPE and get your certification renewed, or you can also appear for exam again. So it is not necessary for to appear for exam. You can use the CPE route, continuing professional education route to that sort of extent. To that extent. The question on AI, like I said, there is a paper on responsible use of AI, which is still out there for SEBI comments. Once the paper is out, we will have more, understanding with respect to what the regulatory sort of, intent is over there. From an MITC perspective, I would request you to look at the MITC circular, which has specific requirements with respect to whether the client consent is required or whether the client signature is required. At some places, SEBI has very, very specifically said signature of the client. Other places, they have said, information to client. So I would request you to look at regulation to that extent to understand, that perspective. There's some business question in terms of broking and research, which we have already answered. Again, eligibility of RA, which we have said. The question with respect to segregation of clients with respect to MFD and research analysts, those we have done. Um, Again, there is a question about recommending international stocks. So my understanding is that the current research analyst regulations are specific to, what is defined as security in India. And security is defined as something which is listed on stock exchanges in India. And to that extent, there is a possibility that the international stocks are currently outside the purview of research analyst regulation. But they would certainly be in the purview of the regulator of those international stocks. So, I don't know what is the regulation with respect to, let's say if you are trying to recommend stocks in US, we don't know with respect to whether the US regulator requires you to register or not. From an Indian perspective, they only cover securities which are defined under SCARA, and SCARA includes, securities which are defined or listed in India to that extent. Okay. There's a question on lean, which I've answered. That part is done. Jobs in securities market, average. There's a question if a PMS along with fund management team and employees invest in PMS strategies they manage. I think this question is more specific to PMS regulation. I would leave it on the PMS experts over there. But what is mentioned in the FAQ is that if any of the fund manager or any other intermediary who is going out and presenting their research in public, they are required to kind of comprehend and disclose their interest as well as follow certain requirements with respect to regulation of research analyst, and those regulation itself what people would sort of follow to that extent. I think that completes majority of our questions. Sahil, if there are any more questions, let me know. As a reminder, if there are more questions, I would request you to put it on your chat box in you know or Q&A box, and we can take it up from there. You can refer to the FAQ paper which is published by SEBI on 23rd of July 2025. That has the text of majority of the questions which we have taken, and then go from there. There's a question on MITC. Well, MITC is a standard format and is a standard clauses. And as long as you follow the same clause which the MITC has, I don't think you need to uh, do anything else to that extent. Plus, KYC is required to be done if you are onboarding him as a client. And if he is a client, then yes, KYC is required. If he's not a client, then obviously KYC is not required to that extent. Is an IA required to register qualify if the IA advises foreign investors who invest in India? It's a different question. My understanding is that all investors who are investing in India, including NRIs, are included. But if you are looking at FPIs or foreign nationals who are not Indian citizens, then they are not sort of covered over here. They might be covered in IFSCA or some other sort of regulatory jurisdiction over there, but not under the investment advisory regulation. Now, certain jurisdiction, for example, especially in US, if you recall, the way US covers is if you are advising to any of their residents, even if they are, non-passport holders or their citizen anywhere outside their country, they are covered. So, while you may be able to kind of, not register under one regulation, under the home country regulation, you might be sort of required to do that. The question on doing, recommendations through social media and disclosure of financial interest. I think wherever you are recommending, there has to be some disclosure on financial interest. There is no specification in terms of how it has to be done. Typically, most people who come on TV media channels, they will have a disclaimer at the bottom of the page which talks about what interest they have and how they have it, and go from there. You can always have additional links for disclaimers and disclosures which are there on additional website, but I would request you to kind of also provide disclosures at the very page itself where you are doing it to that extent. On retail investors and barriers to entry, I think regulator has also evolved over a long period of time. Uh, you know, RA regulation is barely 10 years old. And to that extent, I think what a research analyst, what SEBI team is doing is taking a lot of feedback from the associations and individual RAs. And they have this initiative called Ease of Doing Business, where if you are sort of looking at certain aspects of regulations which are hindering the growth, they are more than happy to kind of consider. And a lot of changes which you've seen in last 1 year, including the deposit requirements and changes and allowing these part-time investment advisor, research analyst, is essentially meant for doing that ease of business to that extent. At this point in time, there are almost 1,500 odd research analysts in India, and I think they are growing to that extent. But SEBI also has a sandbox environment which one can use if they want to test their fintechs to that extent. From advertisement approval perspective, one needs to apply to the, administrative and supervisory body, in this case, which is BSC. They have a certain criteria with respect to how many ads you can apply with, what are the, approval fees and etc. Once you apply and they approve, you can use that advertisement from subject to the advertisement code guideline to that extent. There are few RA communities. I don't know if they're very formal, but the last I heard, there was a community being formed of research analysts, and they would very soon be sort of formalizing and taking memberships, and then you can probably become members for those. But like I said, there is a community which is out there to that extent. The questions with respect to periodic reporting to clients, I think as long as the client is subscribed to you and you are providing him research reports, it would be good to kind of provide them updates to that extent. uh, I don't know about what are the requirements for becoming social media influencer without violating regulations. But yes, we have few regulated RIAs and RAs who are also social media influencers, and I think they take extreme care in disclosures, as well as making sure that all their advertisements are approved. At the same time, disclosures and disclaimers are given to the client, specific to securities or other products which they are recommending to that extent. If you look at the erstwhile question, there is a separate question available in separate, SEBI FAQ of research analyst regulation itself, where it is clarified that if you are advising to an FPI for investing in Indian securities, you are not required to register under research registered investment advisor regulations to that extent. However, majority of the time when you advise an FPI, the FPI would always have a requirement for you to be regulated. So even if the local regulation might give you an exemption, in the case of IA registration, you might still be required to register under the home regulation to do it to that extent. So one thing which I think the research analyst regulation provides is to do objective research and provide basis for research. If they find that there is any misuse of whatever recommendations are you're giving, and there is a market manipulation, then there are ways and means by regulator to address those situations. So irrespective of whether it is written in the regulation or not, I think SEBI is very very vigilant on retail investors protection. And if people, and you will see the orders left right set on their website, which talks about some of those things. Thank you so much for all the time and questions on the webinar. You can sort of look at the RA regulations and the FAQ as published on the website. Uh,
I would like to wish you thank you for taking the time to speaking at our webinar. Really, your insight, expertise, and engaging presentation made a lasting impact on our audience. Once again, sir, thank you so much for your time and knowledge. Thank you.